It's the 5th of September 2021. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host tonight, the nuclear proctologist. .org. Oops. I forgot the battery for the Geiger counter again. We'll fix it. You can call into the show at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. Always takes us 30 seconds to a minute. Get the brain to work. Let's get at it. Hope everybody's doing good. Thank you, Colette. Hugs for you, too. So we missed a hurricane in the United States of America. And telling that story, there was 2 nuclear power plants in the way. They were both shut down. Some pro-nuclear industries reported they weren't shut down and that they were perfect. Lunatics. So this hurricane, we'll start off with that story, came ashore in the United States at 155 miles per hour. This is due to Fukushima radioactive fallout. So these are supercelled hurricanes that are striking. And calling them intensifying, it doesn't really do it justice. These are F4, F5 tornadoes. So at 155 miles per hour, it's gusting actually over 200 miles per hour. They used 155 miles per hour, and then you can see this one here, they got wind speeds at 150 miles per hour, the gust at 185. But if you actually do the scale, it's well over 200 miles per hour. And 150, 155 is what you typically reported at. But 155, at 156, it's a category 5. At 155, it's a category 4. At 156, the federal government kicks in. At 155, it doesn't. And so all the media downplayed it. If you got a hurricane that's coming ashore, onshore, unprecedented, at 150 in their version, but the majority said 155, you are an idiot if you don't call that a category 5. It was the 4th worst hurricane in history there, I think worldwide really, that they're claiming anyway, on land. But 150 mile per hour, there is no infrastructure down there that is built to withstand 150 miles per hour or 155. Nothing. That's a category. It's also the equivalent of a 500 or 600 mile wide tornado. And so Fukushima radioactive fallout has covered the ocean from the surface to the ocean floor, for instance, with radiation that is suspended, pulsing energy every second, heated up the oceans. The hurricanes now are going, and cyclones and typhoons are going over a heated ocean that is extraordinary, heating up more each year. And so these supercell storms are now the norm. These fishes, 4 years ago, we had 5 of them in America in the Atlantic, one right after another. These are incredible. So you see 155 mile per hour is a category 4. 1 more mile per hour is a category 5. Category 5, more people would have got out of the way. Category 5, less lives would have been lost. Category 5, they would have got real help. So this is the nuclear industry's toehold in every facet of media, downplaying it. I've never seen anything like it. So you have nuclear power plants, but you also have nuclear waste sites along that coastline. You also have nuclear waste plants along that coastline They downplayed it. Unbelievable, despite the fact. And then the media, of course, there's no such thing as the media. There's this captured entity that calls themselves the media. They're owned by the industries, the military and the nuclear industry. Tracking IDA, 150 miles per hour. This is absurd to suggest that it's not a Category 5. Horrific scumbags to do something like that. It is forecast to hit the industrial corridor between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Site of 3 key ports, petrochemical sites and nuclear power plant. There's actually 2 nuclear power plants plus nuclear waste sites along that area. They shut down and lost all external power supply. When a nuclear power plant loses external power supply, it's running on diesel just to cool the system. It's not physically running anymore. It doesn't run on its own power. Nuclear power plants need 2 external power supplies to work: gas, oil, and cold. It doesn't run on its own power. People call it carbon-free. It should be thrown off a building. Waterford 3 nuclear power plant site. It's a bad idea to site a nuclear power plant in a location subject to hurricane force winds and storm surge flooding. Yeah, great observation. The last island hurricane struck the south coast on August the 10th, 1856, with a Category 4 sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. So in 1856, it was hard to get an accurate wind speed back in those days, right? Now, they did build houses and stuff like this that were gorgeous. The windows, the carving, the wood was amazing. The cabinetry, musical instruments, all this stuff, they were very advanced. A lot of people don't appreciate how advanced society was actually 500 years ago. But when it comes to actual mile per hour accuracy, they were lagging. Construction began in 1974. It took 11 years to get the first plant open. They have a 10-mile plume exposure pathway through there, by the way, and a 50-mile ingestion pathway zone. So, like, you got a 10-mile zone with sirens, but a 50-mile zone where you're going to ingest it. Obviously, the sirens should extend out to 50 miles minimum. By the way, in that 50-mile zone, you'll see an absurd amount of Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and Down syndrome and schizophrenia. You'll see heart problems and liver problems, lung and respiratory and pituitary, thyroid and adrenaline. You see 1,800 illnesses spiked anywhere within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant. Ida strengthened. So they got it. Winds at 120 miles per hour. The gusts are 40 miles. Yet winds at 155. The gusts were only 25 miles per hour. Gusting to 160 miles per hour. It was actually gusting well over 200 miles per hour. I just want to touch on it because we never covered it, and that's important. Hi, everybody. Yeah, you won't get notifications. That's actually turned off. YouTube has turned it off in my settings. So when I post a video, there is no notifications that go to subscribers. I notice sometimes it does, but generally it's impossible to count on it. And I'm doing the shows an hour later than normal. We're still trying to catch up after multiple failed attempts to do research expeditions this year. And last year, we were stymied. Parts for the engine, outboard engine, are apparently in my mailbox waiting for me. And so tomorrow I should have them installed. I'm not sure what the weather is going to do tomorrow, whether I'll be able to get on the ocean. We know all the fish are missing down here. There's a collapse of salmon also in Alaska now. And they're trying to go out and get halibut and stuff like that so they can survive through the winter, for instance, because they're normally dependent upon let's keep rolling here because we've got a lot to get through. Louisiana's home to 2 nuclear power plants and multiple nuclear waste sites. One out near New Orleans and another about 27 miles, 43 kilometers north of Baton Rouge. Those 3 sentences, I've seen that everywhere. Those exact words. Exact words. Different stories, but exact words for those particular sentences showed up everywhere. Again, you see Louisiana's home to 2 nuclear power plants, one near New Orleans, blah, 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 blah. Another story, Hurricane Ida strikes. You see the same sentences. Another story, different story from Canada. You see the exact same sentence again. Another stories. Frustration with power outages grows as Entergy, which is running the nuclear plants, I'm not sure, but I believe it's both of them, promises more restoration soon. Just before nightfall, Entergy New Orleans has not restored power to several neighborhoods the company promised will be back online. 600,000 still without power. This was, it knocked down more poles than Katrina, Zeta, and Delta combined by a large margin. Gee, really? At 200 mile per hour gust due to Fukushima radioactive fallout? Entergy spokeswoman Lee Sabatini said Waterford 3 nuclear power plant site in St. Charles Parish safely shut down prior to the storm. Remember that for the next story. Was shut down prior to the storm, which is a federal requirement. I believe over 75 mile per hour winds they shut down. There was some damage to support buildings there, but no damage to the nuclear facilities. Well, support buildings are the nuclear facilities for starters, and these nuclear power sites are storing nuclear waste also on their site at ground level where the flooding would have came through. She said Entergy was able to keep all critical systems running at Waterford using diesel generators, like the pumps to cool the systems down. Because you shut down a reactor, it doesn't cool down. You have to keep 1 million gallons a minute pumping through it. But has not established a time for restarting the nuclear power plant there. Well, why not? That's a really interesting facet to that story. But then this story from Hot Air came out. What Ida taught us about nuclear power grids and the nuclear energy. By Jazz Shah. What a sack of doo-doo. The new gas plants never failed during Ida, nor did the 2 nuclear power plants. All of them were humming along and ready to produce electricity throughout the entirety of one of the worst storms seen in generations, which is an absolute blatant lie. They weren't running. They're required by federal law, by the federal authorities, to shut down, by the way, at 75 miles per hour. This thing was hitting land at 155 plus miles per hour. They downplayed it so they wouldn't have to kick in federal money. The scum, the coward, the creeps, the lunatics, really. The storm slammed into the state with 150 mile per hour. It hit land at about 160, 170. It was gusting well past 200 miles per hour. And when you look at the actual damage of Ida done, that's easy to believe, right? Wind turbines have maximum wind speed under which they can operate. So does nuclear power plants, scumbags. And those solar panels don't produce much in the dark at night or when the sky is completely blanketed with swirling storm clouds. What a degenerate, So this person is obviously promoting nuclear, right? It's unbelievable, these people. This incredible hubris. It's really something, you know? So you can store energy, not with batteries, but just with Mother Nature. So excess energy, pumped hydro can deliver 100% renewable electricity. It's 100%. You pump water up a hill with excess electricity stored from when there's no wind or solar. Or you can dig tunnels, and they're doing it. It works perfectly. You dig tunnels and you compress air down into the tunnel with excess solar or wind power. So when the sun is not shining or the wind's not blowing, you have stored energy. 2 different ways to do it. Both of them are simple. One of them, you don't even need water, compressed air. Technology is obsolete technology. But by the way, new wind and solar, just in 2020, was, I missed it. New wind and solar in 2020. Where did that go? Here, hang on. I got it. In 2020, there was 261 gigawatts. That's equal to 300 nuclear power plants came online. 300 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online last year. And there's only 440 nuclear plants in the world. Technology doubles every year, so this year there'll be around 600 nuclear power plants where the renewables coming online. So those who claim that or argue we absolutely must construct more nuclear power plants to beat the climate emergency. By the way, climate change is nuclear. Climate change is actually nuclear. I can show you a depiction to explain that sometimes. Hang on. So I'm excited. We're going to have parts for the boat showing up tomorrow. It's a sensor for the oil sending units, because my motor, after about 5 or 10 minutes, gets a false reading. And so we had the idler control valve went. And what happens there is it won't start up. It won't idle at all, right? And you have to give it throttle, which is a separate lever on the outboard motors, to get it to start up. As soon as you pull down that, you got to pull that lever down to neutral in order to put it in the gear, because you can't put it in gear with the idler up. The engine will cut out. And I can drift out to sea doing stuff like that. I managed to make it in, right? So we repaired that, but the sending unit also went, and I don't know if that was when I took everything apart and put it back together, because we can't afford a mechanic. Those who argue we absolutely must construct more nuclear plants to beat it are liars. So back to that story from Hot Air, Jazz Shah. Instead, we see environmentalists advocating for the elimination of traditional, reliable power generation technology. Many are calling for the closures of nuclear power plants, which he claims produces zero carbon emissions. Zero carbon emissions. One of the 2 sources of energies that didn't fail during the hurricane. Once again, it did fail. They had to shut it down at 75 miles per hour. First off, this is the emissions, just a model, a short-term model. It's not an accurate model. It was the venting, not the actual nuclear meltdowns. So the radioactive fallout covering the northern hemisphere, this actually happened. It's still going on today. It's exterminating all the species. You can't start the motor in gear, Christian, no. I might be able to, but I don't. When it happened, I wasn't able to, and right now I'm not able to. You probably can, but I don't know how to do it. This is a 4-stroke fuel injection engine. So this radioactive fallout is pulsing energy, invisible snowstorm covering the entire planet, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. That's global warming. That's been going on for 75 years. All the nuclear wars, you call it nuclear testing, they're actually nuclear wars. It's the same weapons and the same radioactive fallouts. Some of the nuclear bombs, so they say, oh, there's 1,050 bombs, Dana, exploded. Okay, so one of the Soviet Union's bombs was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki nuclear bombs. Nagasaki nuclear weapon is one of the 1,050 nuclear weapons set off on the planet. But imagine there's actually 3,800, that's a low estimate, by the way, from just a single nuclear weapon. Castle Bravo was equal to over 1,000 Nagasaki, Hiroshima type nuclear bombs. 1,000. So they're equal, that's the radioactive fallout. Is the same as 1,000 nuclear weapons, or the same as 3,800 Hiroshima type bombs. And so the radioactive fallout looks like that. Pulsing energy every second. That's actually global warming. So nuclear is always hemorrhaging radiation. It's not carbon-free. You can't call nuclear carbon-free. It uses 2 oil, gas, coal plants in order to run a nuclear power plant, for starters. In order to run it, you got to have external power supplies. By the way, gas, oil, and coal, their emissions don't cover the entire planet, and their emissions don't pulse energy for every second for millions of years at the speed of light. So retiring 100 gigawatts of capacity by 2040 may threaten a nuclear supply, but last year was 261 gigawatts came online, 2.5 times more what they were worried about in 2040 going offline came online, the equivalent to 300 nuclear power plants. So when you say one of the 2 sources of energy that didn't fail during a hurricane, that's outrageous. That is outrageous that somebody said that when they had to turn off the nuclear power plants. Walt Disney says Nevada test site has been nuked 2,000 times. Yeah, they've done all kinds of dirty bombs too, where they just actually blew up plutonium and blew up uranium. There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of that just in Australia. Now, like, once again, one of the Soviet Union bombs is equal to 3,800 Hiroshima-sized bombs. It's absurd. It's a disgusting industry. We counted the tanks at the Fukushima site. There's not 1,000. At best, there's 750, but 150 of them are the little small tanks, little tiny tanks. It takes 20 of them to fill up a big tank. So when you see this model here of radioactive fallout, remember that a single atom can give you an illness or a disease or autoimmune deficiencies, illnesses, and injuries. And that inhaling particles increases the exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims, they didn't look for internal exposure, they only looked at external exposures. And they refused to give them medical help for 75 years. Because they said there was no way they were breathing in radiation, even though they were at ground zero. Now the reason they say that is because they rebuilt the cities on nuclear bomb craters. All nuclear bomb craters everywhere else on the planet, you can't go there because they're so radioactive. The industry is a lunatic. It's just an incredible lunatic. Fukushima radiation monitoring post to be renewed. The story came out tonight. They got 3,000 fake Geiger counters set up at schools. So instead of evacuating the children, they set up fake Geiger counters to trick them and to make them complacent and deceive them, to make them stay there, to make the industry look like it's not evil. We should all hang our heads in shame that they done that. Everybody on the planet should be humiliated that they done that. And other locations across the prefectures following the March 2011 accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. There wasn't an accident. They built it on a fault line. They put all the reactor cores at the top of the buildings, so when it melted down, there'd be no way to remove decades of reactor cores from harm's way. Idiots. Actual idiot machine. On purpose, though. It's not idiots. These are murderers. The annual test and maintenance cost of the fake Geiger counters is about $5.5 million American dollars. The captured regulation authorities decided in 2018 to remove 80% of the Geiger counters, they call monitoring posts, saying that they're Geiger counters that don't actually work, saying that radiation levels remain at low and the posts would likely reach their lifespan of about 8 years. The regulators who never went to the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The fake authorities reversed the decisions after met opposition from local residents that should have been evacuated 10 years ago. It decided instead to retain the monitoring post for the time being to ease people's concerns about radiation levels and their health. So they're going to leave the fake Geiger counters there. They're disgusting. All of them needs to be arrested for doing what they've done. The authorities plan to replace parts in radiation detectors and power supply sources because they go offline. All these fake reactors or fake Geiger counters. About 300 fake Geiger counters will be renewed annually. Some 450 monitoring posts, aka Geiger counters, containing parts that are hard to obtain will be replaced entirely. So they're going to leave the fake ones there. It's like that tunnel they're going to dig offshore. James Luce is asking, how are they going to ship Fukushima nuclear waste to Newfoundland? On barges? FedEx? Don't put it past them. I got no idea, but they were setting it up secretively, and they didn't want the population to know. So Boston Dynamics, which is bought by Google, by the way, Mark Wahlberg, or is that his name? I can't remember. So I'm going to play this video of the latest robots that they got weaponized against us. You can't watch that, can you? Yeah. And so these are running on hydrogen. Notice how quiet they actually were. And what they're planning on doing is setting it up so that they have a little device will shoot up also electricity, will shoot up to a telephone pole line, hook over it, and they can fast charge themselves to 90% in about 3 minutes. So they can run right across the country. And so imagine this thing kicking you in the head. They're lunatics, boy. It's all about military. It's all about murdering the planet. It's all about destroying humanity. When anti-nuclear groups are portrayed as anti-nationals, as a roadblock to progress. So anti-nuclear groups, no, they're pro-life groups. Nuclear is an extinction event. Anti-nuclear awareness in India is at a nascent stage, though there is some understanding among those living near nuclear power plants. Many presses and media houses have subsequently been to the site and have documented some of these problems. As a result, the government no longer denies there is a problem. In 1986, Chernobyl's accident was eye-opener for the world. The debate on the use of nuclear power sparked a fire. People became aware of nuclear energy and its consequences, which is true, right? The Castle Bravo test radiated a Japanese ship called a Lucky Dragon 100 miles away with lethal doses, by the way. 100 miles away. And their fish was so contaminated they had to bury it in the ground, even though a lot of it was distributed out through the country. Japan at that time actually quit eating fish for several years. It might have even been a decade where they wouldn't eat fish again because of the Castle Bravo nuclear test. During an extensive conversation with me, they talked about the struggles of such people, their movements, and the roles of the nuclear activists. Dr. Surendra Gadikar is a well-known Indian nuclear activist and a physicist, and his wife is a physician and has worked in the government medical service for some years. They live in a remote tribal village near an atomic power plant in western Indian state. This is an interesting story. So, they run a school called, I'm going to butcher the name, my apologies, Sampurnad Conranti, I'm not going to try that, or Institute of Total Revolution for Young Activists and Monitors the Indian nuclear industry, conducting surveys of power plants, uranium mines, nuclear testing facilities to determine the effects on the public health. My goodness, that takes some real balls in an oppressive country, don't it? In 1987, they founded a journal devoted to establishing non-nuclear India. The Liberation from the Atom is the leading anti-nuclear journal in India, perhaps all of South Asia. And since the beginning, they've been opposed to nuclearization of India, either in the guise of producing energy or making weapons. So the Institute of Total Revolution promotes nonviolent society change. India is a home to a handful of the world's largest nuclear power plants. And blah, blah, blah. Other notable atomic power plants are situated throughout it. We'll get to it. Some people in India became aware of the severe dangers posed by these nuclear projects to the people living in the vicinity. Small groups of people started trying to discover the risk posed by such plants, even during routine operations. And the awareness about atomic energy was one such group. There were discussions, demonstrations, where people questioned the authorities about the information of these power stations. The authorities' response was atypical of the atomic power plants around the world. They bombarded the public with jargon. And when people became insistent, they used police repression. And a 13-year-old boy was killed by the police, and they continued for months. The police beat up the public to terrorize them. And the people of Kakapara, butchered the name, my apologies, felt helpless and alone in the misery. That movement erupted in other parts of India as well, in the States. People protested against the proposed nuclear power plant after Fukushima. Remember, there was 9,000 of them arrested and charged with sedition for protesting a nuclear power plant. Charged with sedition for protesting a nuclear death machine. The movement garnered much attention, and the police blocked all the roads to prevent the protests from reaching the site. However, with a group of about 30 women and volunteers, they managed to reach the place by traveling through the thick tropical rainforest. And she was a representation of the fearless zeal and inspiration to the anti-nuclear movement in India. And in December 1988, the Citizens for Alternatives to Nuclear Energy, the Kane Group, forces the government to organize a national debate on the proposed nuclear power plant. And it was evidence from this debate that the atomic establishment of India was not going to listen to other views because there was a scarcity of information on the effects of people's health. But the evidence was out there, it was just hid away from the population. There was no need for a scientific conclusion. This village invited the Kane Group to witness the situation. The village was under the influence of a nuclear power plant, but there was no electricity or clean drinking water for them. However, contrary to the town's development, the people faced many serious health issues, and since Dr. Gadakar was the first doctor ever to visit that town, people shared their concerns and problems about their health with her. The Kane Group surveyed to understand the effects of public health on the people living in the proximity of the nuclear power plant. The survey was carried out by volunteers who were experts in surveying, and a large number of women turned out as volunteers, which we see mostly happening is the women are the ones that really, when they see a problem, they actually address it. We see that worldwide too. Helped in surveying and analyzing the data. And people of the nearby villages and town also helped the group provide shelter and food. The result of the survey was staggering. Following data analysts, it was discovered that people living near nuclear power stations were aging faster and were likely to die 10 years younger. It also showed that people suffered prolonged ailments, especially of the skin and digestive tracts, and that the people also complained of feeling of debility and perpetual fatigue, much similar to a disease symptom found in victims of Hiroshima. Right, because the radiation gets in your body attacks your white blood cells, that displaces your red blood cells permanently, which is carrying oxygen and nutrition throughout your body. So one of the effects of radiation illness is fatigue. Perpetual fatigue, much similar, and they found. So it's a great story. You should read it. Links are below. The women were also affected, which is evidence with many miscarriages, stillbirths, deaths of newborns, and infants born with congenital disabilities within 1 day of birth. This is something that we've covered extensively. All of these resonate. We do not want power to price of that electricity's deformity in their children. And the reaction of the government to the survey was pre-assumed. They publicly denied the problem, and many media's houses have subsequently been to the site and have documented these problems, and as a result, the government no longer denies that there is a problem. The government blames the problem due to poverty, malnutrition, ignorance, and superstition, but not because of the nuclear plants. One thing we know about nuclear is that they're a hateful, coward industry. It's a hateful, despicable, cowardly industry. They also try to portray the group as an anti-nationals, as a roadblock to the path of the country's progress. However, the people within the nuclear establishment have admitted to the problem, but have said that somebody must pay the price of the development. Think about that incredible arrogance. It's the entire planet and all 8 million species now that are being exterminated because of nuclear, radioactive fallout from all the nuclear venting, nuclear accidents. Women have essential roles to play in providing this understanding since they are the worst sufferers. It is easier for them to see through the false rhetoric of power and to get to the heart of the problem, which is the assault on the health and well-being of the present and future generations. And women are among the most active members of the various anti-nuclear groups. And I know that for a fact. They've organized various anti-nuclear activities in different parts of the country, and the country needs many more. Well, the whole world should use these incredible, beautiful souls as an example. And remember, they live in one of the most repressive societies in history, and yet they still forged ahead, despite the odds against them in every way. Amazing, actually. Oh, the Taliban will push for nuclear arms. The Taliban. So we're just 6 days away, 6 days away from September 11th, 2001, 20th anniversary. And remember, they took down my site a few weeks back. Some of my videos had 2 million views on September 11th, where I was able to show unequivocally that September 11th was a staged event. I will be doing a September 11th anniversary. Every year I do a September 11th anniversary video. Every year they take it down and I get a strike on my account. This year, I'm assured, will be no different. First off, the Taliban. So 10,000 Taliban. They flattened Afghanistan, 28 million people. They got millions dead, millions missing, millions of refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. They fired 5.5 million rounds a month for 9 years to get 10,000 Taliban. A few years later, they went to Iraq. They flattened every building in the country. They sprayed it with depleted uranium. By the way, the A-10 Warthog only shoots depleted uranium munitions, dirty bombs. Millions dead, millions unaccounted for, millions in refugee camps, millions missing, millions of orphans, and firing 5.5 million rounds a month. They got rid of the pensions and the patents of both Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're not allowed to grow the hereditary seeds there, only Monsanto seeds. There was 400 allegedly went to Pakistan, where they fired 22,000 drone strikes, usually at weddings. Out of the few hundred Taliban that was remaining, 100 of them allegedly went to Africa, where they became known as Boko Haram. So in Africa, they got millions dead, millions missing, millions of refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. They destroyed 10 million people's homes and communities and cities and infrastructure. Another 100 of them became ISIL and allegedly went to Syria, where there's 7 million refugees. And if you've seen the pictures of Syria, to get 100 Taliban in Syria, they created, the US government and British created 7 million refugees and flattened their country to get 100 Taliban. So 10,000 Taliban destroyed multiple countries because the Americans and the British, the military-industrial complex that is, blew up and flattened every building in their country. Just bear with me. Normally that video will come up. Let me try one more time. Let's see if we can bring up that video of Syria. If not, I gotta find it tomorrow. I think that's it. This is in order to get 100 Taliban. This is what they've done to Syria. It's called collective punishment, right? The whole country looks like that to get 100 Taliban. The entire country. Does anybody think that 100 Taliban could have done that? They fired 22,000 drone strikes to get 400 Taliban in Pakistan. Like I said, once you get mostly blown up wedding parties. I don't have a solution, but are the United States and its allies ready to have nuclear weapons in the hands of the Taliban? At best, there's around they say there's 200 Taliban left on the planet somewhere. And they think they're going to take over Pakistan with over 1 billion people. No, this is the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and the misery machine needs to invoke fear. They were used to invoke fear and destroy country after country after country. 10,000 Taliban, which became 10,000 Boko Haram and 10,000 ISIL and 10,000 Hamas, right, in Palestine, created 5 million refugees. They can't get the 10,000 Hamas, but they sure as hell can keep the 5 million refugees out. Los Alamos lab threatens to shoot down your drone. Everybody, we should have 500,000 people go there with their drones and fly them at one time. Drone pilots beware, the lunatics. Los Alamos don't want you flying drones because it's a nuclear wasteland. They don't want the footage getting out because if I see it, I'll be able to show you crimes they're committing. The birthplace of the atomic bomb. In fact, Los Alamos National Laboratory is built on one of the biggest freshwater aquifers in that part of the country. And it ain't freshwater aquifer no more. That's an attribute we see with almost all of these facilities worldwide. They're built on the biggest freshwater aquifers in that part of their countries. It can't be an accident. Uranium weak, dual role for nuclear reactors. Talking about hydrogen. Spot prices of US $33 a pound, up $2.50 from last week. And since early March, it was 20% increase, which marks a year-high spot price for 2021 and has increased nearly 99% so far in 2021, over 8% in the last week. $33 a pound is not enough money to pay the miners, let alone the fuel fabrication facilities and everything else, by the way. But what they're trying to do with these numbers is trick people into buying stocks. I have a folder, the list in the folder just keeps rolling of them pushing uranium stocks, particularly stuff like the Globe and Mail here in Canada. 3 times a week they'll pump uranium stocks out there. Ever since Fukushima happened, and the stocks have always went down, never up. In fact, the day they convicted me and gave me gag orders, uranium stocks flatlined and never recovered after. The lowest number in history was the very next day after they convicted me. And that went public to 1,600 medias worldwide, right? We got him! Like I was Saddam Hussein or Osama bin Laden or something. Finland's Olkiluoto 3 nuclear reactor faces another delay. Should be faces endless delays. It was supposed to be finished in 2009 and was beset by a series of setbacks. Beset. It was supposed to be finished 13 years ago. It's a scum degenerate technology. It's not even a technology, it's a secret cult, a secret society and a death cult. With regular electricity production starting June next year. Good luck on that. It was supposed to be up and running in 2009, for God's sakes. Belgian nuclear phase-out an irreversible loss, says the World Nuclear News. The World Nuclear News is actually, who never put their names on a story, by the way, is actually the nuclear lobbying group. They're just lobbyists. And I say that's a nice thing to say. They're actually degenerate scumbag lobbyists. They're 100% murderers. Everybody who works at the World Nuclear News are anti-life. They're anti-insects, anti-birds, anti-whales, anti-humans, anti-species. An open letter to the Prime Minister has called for the country, an open letter from who? Has called for the country's anti-nuclear policies to be reevaluated and for Belgium's nuclear facility and skills to be positively applied in an effort to avert climate change. How can you use nuclear to avert climate change? Nuclear is climate change. This is a model of radioactive fallout from just one nuclear accident, pulsing energy every second. That's what I mean. These people, everybody that works there, should be beaten up and put in jail for 1 billion years. They should be given every type of life extending technology and should be kept in jail for 1 billion years. And children should be given sticks and go by and poke them. No, that's a nuclear scumbag. Avert climate change. The only way to get rid of climate change is to kill the nuclear industry. The government's decision to phase out nuclear energy, the largest source of low carbon energy. Largest source of low carbon, eh? Well, here's the problem with a nuclear power plant. They threaten mass extinction around the entire planet. How is that low carbon? I'd tear your head off if you said it to my face, called it low carbon. I literally tear your head right off if you call nuclear low carbon to my face. The largest source of low carbon energy in Belgium. This is what they do, right? Oh, low carbon. Every new gas power plant subsidized on Belgium soil has emitted active pollution over several decades. First off, if you don't have gas, oil, or coal power plants, you can't run a nuclear plant. Nuclear plants can't exist without gas, oil, and coal. And they love coal because coal is cheap. Beyond 2050, the target date for carbon neutrality. So what they done was, a few years ago, the nuclear industry conspired in Paris, France. And if you go watch my last video that I posted about John Chrétien, you'll see that every prime minister in Canada for decades worked for a company from France, and so did most of the premiers of the provinces have worked for a special company in France. Try wrapping your mind around it. Sedition is being polite. I wish, Mr. Prime Minister, so 230, Horizon 238 is a non-profit organization that promotes nuclear, started up by the nuclear lobbying group, who gets money funneled in from the nuclear industry. It's a Ponzi scheme, eh? 18 years ago, be reevaluated. A political choice made 18 years ago. to get rid of nuclear. We ask you to reconsider the nuclear phaser because it's a low-carbon energy source. Well, it's not a low-carbon energy source now, is it? Horizon 38. Everybody in that organization should be arrested and jailed for 1,000 years. The nuclear lobbying group, Horizon 38, 238, right, and they play on words during it, so the closure would result in irreversible loss of a valuable asset in the fight against climate change. So the only thing that they can promote nuclear is climate change, and nuclear is climate change. The reason there is climate change is because of nuclear releases into the environment. The kooky, despicable, cowardly world of nuclear. The hateful, maniacal, vicious, scum, mass genocide world of nuclear. This is another model of the Fukushima radioactive fallout, covering the entire planet with radiation. Pulsing energy every second, heating the planet up. That's climate change. Coal doesn't do that. Oil doesn't do that. Gas doesn't do that. No other emissions covers the planet with their emissions. Only nuclear. And no other emissions pulses energy every second. Pure energy every second for millions of years. Or even a day. The only thing that does it is nuclear. Calling it low carbon. Anybody that calls nuclear low carbon should have their tongue cut out immediately. And should be jailed forever. They're a threat to all the species that might survive. Nuclear storage plans for north of England stirs up local opposition. They want to put a nuclear waste site right under people's houses, basically, in the United Kingdom. Why do they need to put these places in communities for? And you've got to be a community that's surrounded by farmland, right? All nuclear power plants have to be surrounded by farmlands. What's up with that? Well, that's the genocide machine. You think that's an accident that the majority of nuclear power plants are surrounded by farmlands? I'll show you a little depiction of what I'm talking about. Just because I'm like that, I'm such a good guy. You like this? Here's a depiction of a nuclear power plant for the United Kingdom, because we're talking about the United Kingdom. And it's surrounded by farmland. That's another depiction of it. Surrounded by farmland, right up to the nuclear power plant. That's just a model of the future nuclear power plant, and they want it surrounded by farmland. So when you look at nuclear power plants, the one thing you notice is they built them in farm countries. Always surrounded by farms. As far as you can see, surrounded by farms. Do you think that's actually an accident? Oh, and communities if they can. But particularly farms. They love farms. Because farms soak up the radiation. And then they poison you. Look at it. Do you think that that's an accident that all of these nuclear power plants... And if you look up pictures of nuclear power plants, what you're going to see is exactly what I'm showing you. That 99% of the pictures of the plants, when you can find wide-angle views, 99% of them will be surrounded by farms. Even Sellafield is surrounded by farms. A nuclear meltdown Sellafield is surrounded by farms. This should terrify you. That should actually, and they do the same thing with nuclear waste sites. And you put most of the nuclear power plants in Tornado Alley on top of that. You really think this is an accident that nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms? Does anybody really think they don't know what they're doing? There's Chalk River in Canada with a nuclear meltdown surrounded by farms. Surrounded by farms, surrounded by farms, surrounded by farms. Completely surrounded by farms and fresh water to poison the fresh water is another one you're going to see. Now, what's insidious about this is that they have studies showing how farms suck up radiation and that food then is used to poison everybody worldwide. So look at all these studies. Do you think that they don't know that grapevines suck up radiation, that strawberries suck up radiation, that wheat sucks up radiation, that tomato plants suck up radiation, fruit plants sucking up radiation, plants sucking up as a monitoring system, potatoes sucking up radiation, fruits suck up the radiation, tree roots sucking up radiation. And then that food that is grown around these plants are used to murder you and your loved ones in increments over time. You really think they don't know that? You really think they built them there accidentally? I'm just talking to the people in the nuclear industry that are pro-nuclear. So they want to put a nuclear repository under a community. Which Bruce Power is doing that here in Canada, by the way. And they want the farms to keep farmers keep farming while they're doing the nuclear repository. And all the nuclear repositories are built, they want to build them right in a community surrounded by farms. They're evil. They're actually evil. They're the worst of the worst. That's the only definition of nuclear is the worst of the worst. Is the scum of the scum, the degenerate of the degenerate, the coward of the cowards. That's what we see. This is not, I'm not trying to be mean. You don't have to be. Nuclear is evil. They're actually evil. Columbia, where much of the waste is stored above ground, is also being considered, which is right alongside of Sellafield nuclear meltdowns, ongoing nuclear meltdowns with 4 million liters of mixed oxide fuel nuclear meltdown hemorrhaging into the Irish Sea every day. For 55 years into the Atlantic Ocean. And all the communities along that coastline have a massive increase of lung cancers and malformations. They love 750 cubic meters of high activity waste is 1.6 billion pounds. If there's you can take a pound and everybody on the planet walks past it, they all die. You can take that 1 pound to another planet and everybody on that planet who walks past it will die. Then you can take that same pound 1,000 years later to another planet full of people and everybody walk past it will die. That's the attributes we're talking about. This stuff, 1.6 million pounds, is still splitting the atom. Still hemorrhaging isotopes vented into the environment that's permanent. It's an extinction event just on its own. But no, they want more plants so they can exterminate all the species quicker. The waste would be solidified. Listen, you can't actually believe a single word. Not a sentence, but a single word from the nuclear industry. Nothing. They don't have a concept of reality. Their concept is, how do we trick people? That's how they think, right? How do we poison people? And how do we trick people? That's it. That's how they think. There's nothing else working up there. It's like, how do we trick people to take nuclear in their community? How are we going to do that? We need a think tank. We need a couple of non-profit organizations so we can trick people into taking this. We don't want it in our community where our children are taught. But these people, they're anti-nuclear. Let's put it there. That's how they actually think. The UK would be following an example of Finland, where a geological repository for high-level spent nuclear fuel is under construction. Would be following the example. No. That's not, like, building something is not an example. If it worked and it was perfect and everything was fine and 1,000 years has gone by, that's an example. But it's going to melt down, for sure. When you walk away from this stuff, it will melt down. If you leave it at the surface, everything is vented into the environment. Guaranteed extinction event. According to who? Professor Geraldine Thomas, probably one of the worst humans in history, Geraldine Thomas. I've covered her 100 times on my other site they took down a few weeks ago with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 presentations. At Imperial College of London, everybody there should be arrested and checked to make sure they're actually human. Who also sits on the Government Radioactive Waste Management Committee. Wow! A perpetual lawyer, Professor Geraldine Thomas, who kills children with radiation in hospitals for kicks. That's what she does in her spare time. Is she calls it treating children. She treats them with radiation, and they all die for some reason. We've got her in there's endless documentation for that disgusting, despicable monster, that despicable coward, that hideous monster. There's nothing but a monster. How the hell is a monster, an actual monster, the Radioactive Waste Management Committee, who sits on the government Radioactive Waste Management Committee? How the hell did you ever get to that stage, United Kingdom? How did you get to that stage where you got an actual monster? An actual monster. She's a monster. She's a mass murderer and a monster. An actual monster. Unbelievable. And Hartlepool's Council's deputy leader, Mike Young, triggered the resignation. He had a resignation. He resigned from his position because of the nuclear dump being put into a community. They hid it away and it came out. And the T-Valley mayor said, the last thing we need as we sell our region to the world is to be known as the dumping ground for the UK nuclear waste. Indeed. If you're going to have a nuclear waste site in the United Kingdom, for God's sakes, put Geraldine Thomas in it first and seal her in there. At least do that much. Her and Jimmy Savile are one and the same, I think. Jimmy Savile never died. He morphed to be Geraldine Thomas. The vast majority of people are horrified. A Maplethorpe resident spokesperson for the Guardians of the East Coast campaign. Bless your hearts for trying. Radiation-free Lakeland groups. State lawmakers again try to ban most dangerous nuclear waste as the feds consider allowing at a West Texas site. This is insane, by the way. A failed regular session bill sought to give a financial break to West Texas Nuclear Waste Disposal Company. So what they do is they create this low-level waste company. They get it up and they get a site, and then they apply to put high-level waste there right away. Well, it could take them 10 years to get it passed, but they go right to work immediately. People are like, oh, it's low-level waste, who cares? Well, you should, because this is what they're doing. They called it a low-level waste and immediately applied for high-level waste permits. And there's no one to stop them. There's no checks and balances. Like, I'm still absurdly confused how this despicable piece of shit is on the government committee for radioactive waste in the United Kingdom. An actual murderer and a person who spent years going around the world perpetuating lies, telling people that nuclear was like a banana or flying on an airplane. She'd be thrown out of an airplane over and over and over. It is a creature. It's a mass murder. She's a mass murderer. The entire planet will regret not putting her away forever, not holding her accountable for genocide and ecocide and omnicide. She's a despicable coward on top of that. She murders children in hospitals with radiation all day. Now, lawmakers have removed what opponents call a giveaway and are again trying to pass a bill to stop highly radioactive material from coming to Texas. But the problem was, they went through a route where they don't have the authority. So the Nuclear Regulation Authority said, oh, ha ha ha, you can't do it that way. Tough luck. So now we're going to let them do it. Right, we covered this last week. After failing to spring, Texas lawmakers again trying to ban the most dangerous types of radioactive waste from entering the state. And at the same time as the nuclear waste disposal company West Texas pursues a federal application to store the highly radioactive material. So that site was a low-level site. Well, hope everybody's doing good. It's infuriating that these people exist. Environmental and consumer advocates for years have decried a proposal to build a 332-acre site in West Texas near the New Mexico border to store the riskiest types of nuclear waste, spent fuel rods from nuclear power plants, which are radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years. They're splitting the atoms for hundreds of... So when you take the reactors out of the reactor core that's powering 1 million homes, that energy has to go somewhere. So they put it in a pool and it boils off the pool. But what happens is it's still splitting the atom. So instead of producing energy for 1 million homes, it's still producing 1 million energies for 1 million homes, but it's outside of containment in a pool. So those atoms are sucked up by the water. That water, 120,000 liters minimum, is boiled off every single day in 440 plants worldwide. Hundreds of trillions of atoms per liter is now boiled off up the stacks and then liberated the atoms into the environment. This is why they're surrounded by the farms, by the way. But it's pulsing energy every second, each of those atoms. And every day, every couple of years, there's another reactor core goes into the pool. A couple of years later, another reactor core goes into these pools. Those reactor cores are still producing energy for 1 million homes. That energy is released as isotopes into the environment. Do you get what's going on here? That's because as the nuclear plants are older, there's more nuclear fuel in the pool. So that means there's more energy expelled every second of every minute of every hour of every day, nonstop for 1 million years. It's insidious. It's actually insidious what they're doing. It's so evil, it defies reality that it could even happen. But there's no mistaking it is happening. This is designed to be clean and easy so we can go on record as the state opposing high-level nuclear waste. Some opponents of nuclear waste, however, say the bill doesn't go far enough. And they don't ban other types of radioactive waste, much of it generated by the decommissioning of nuclear power plants, known as greater than C class. Oh, and they've been trying to classify nuclear waste so they can dump it in your local landfills again, right? Not trying to, but successfully have been doing that. Indian Point to test sirens on Wednesday. Well, we missed that one, didn't we? Indian Point to test sirens. Now, Indian Point, of course, is a death machine. The plant is closed down, but they still have the sirens, because the fuel pools can melt down, and so can the cast. Emergency notification sirens in Indian Point Energy Center, nuclear power plant, nuclear mass genocide machine, will sound during a test of the system. As part of the test, sirens will sound at full volume for approximately 4 minutes in Westchester, Rockland, Orange, and Putnam counties. Because this is only a test, the public is not required to respond during the siren sounding. Holtec, which is decommissioning the nuclear plant, says the public should be aware the sirens are not a signal to evacuate. Well, the sirens were put there by environmentalists, not by the nuclear industry, not by regulators. Those stations are listed emergency planning booklets mailed to the households and businesses in a 10-mile emergency planning zone. If you have an event, the plume comes out. right away. It doesn't wait until you get a notice on TV or your radio, okay? It doesn't care which way the wind is blowing, the plume starts moving out. You got to figure out which way the wind is blowing all day, every day, if you're within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. So if there is an accident, you know which way to run. You shouldn't live within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant. And a nuclear power plant shouldn't exist on planet Earth, period. The emissions are catastrophic for 1 billion years. It's not supposed to exist. Its entire legacy, the entire industry can only exist because its entire legacy is predicated upon deception and misrepresentation and genocide and ecocide and omnicide. Unit 1 was permanently retired, by the way, in 1974. Why did they permanently retire a reactor in 1974? Because it was hemorrhaging radiation into the communities, which is forever. How nuclear kills fish. This is about Indian Point, by the way, that same site we were just talking about. Aging plants have a devastating impact on surrounding fish populations. Environmental analysts in the 2 states have found these facilities, like Indian Point, kill 17 billion fish annually in New York, and another nuclear plant kills 9 billion fish in New Jersey. Wrap your mind around these numbers, by the way. Once through, the cooling systems are also vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish. So this is different ways it's killing fish. Trillions die of the newly hatched fish, destroying them in the heat exchangers. And there is strong evidence that the decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destruction of baby fish than the overfishing of adults by commercial fleets. And that the Indian Point power plant on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily, kills 2 billion juvenile and mature fish a year in the screens. So these are all the different ways that a single plant exterminates the population. But the NRC estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they're sucked into the intake pipes, the 40-foot intake pipes. Killing everything and everywhere, every direction it goes. Everything that it touches, all it does is kill. Commercial, now this is a bizarre story we never would have heard about without an accident. Commercial trailer truck rolls over here in Canada and spills soil. No, this was radiation on Highway 2. See the headline? Commercial trailer truck. Transport truck is the quickest way to convey that narrative. Full of radioactive soil, tips over on Highway 2 alongside a major drinking water river. Police and territorial governments responded to the rollover of a commercial tractor trailer. They don't have to use the word commercial, just tractor trailer. And a contaminated soil spill. It's not contaminated, it's radioactive. Again, it takes them forever for you to find out what the hell they're talking about. Then they claim it's low-level contaminated soil being released on the shoulder of the road into a nearby ditch 10 kilometers south of town. Now it's low-level. A cleanup crew has been dispatched from Fort Smith. A spokesperson for the ENR said that the truck had been hauling low-level radioactive contaminated soil from a landfill in Fort Smith. What the hell is radioactive? And when you say low-level radioactive, this is because they're trying to trick and deceive. This is what they do. They're hateful, despicable cowards. The industry, none but cowards. It's unbelievable. I've never seen an honest person in the nuclear industry a single time. Approximately 22 tons of radioactive soil by Hay River, which is a major drinking water for many communities downstream. The radioactive contaminated soils were en route to a registered facility in Alberta as a remediation project. You don't ship it there unless it's high level. At the time, there is no risk to public safety or the Hay River, which is 100 meters east. Really? It's only 300 feet away. It's a major drinking water river. And you can't clean it all up. And how much does it take to contaminate a river? Very little. This was supposed to be in another place. Between 2011 and 2013, 9,000 protesters. Remember that activist story from India we were talking about earlier? This was supposed to be with that story. My apologies. Over 9,000 protesters at the Kunda nuclear power plant were charged under several sections of laws for protesting a nuclear power plant, including sedition. Imagine being charged with sedition, which is a grave charge, by the way. 9,000 people charged with sedition for protesting a degenerate scumbag nuclear power plant construction. 9,000 people charged with sedition. That shows you how evil the nuclear industry actually is, that they're willing to destroy all of these lives so they can poison everybody else. TEPCO to build undersea tunnel to release Fukushima water offshore. I covered that last week, a whole video on it. If you're not familiar with the subject, you really need to find time and watch the presentation that I already put out about that. And Japan government to buy seafood if Fukushima water release hits the sails. They're going to buy it and freeze it. Calling it crippled. The nuclear meltdown, they're calling it crippled. Help fishermen threatened by reputational damage. No, help fishermen murder people worldwide who eat their product. That's actually what's going on. Hate attacks are incoming. Yeah, anytime now. Dan and Lissana, how's it going down there? I know you got fires encroaching on your homes there in California. I can't say how much I hope and pray that nothing happens to everybody down there. But that fire is out of control down there, I know. Fire is everywhere down there? Wow. Anyone who tells you nuclear is safe needs to be thrown to a fuel pool. Now we're getting somewhere. Drown them in it, actually. Waterboard them a couple of hundred times with fuel water. The move came amid calls for fishermen to come up with specific measures. Calls from fishermen to come up with measures to prevent reputational damage. Oh yeah, I'm sure the fishermen said that. We'll make thorough efforts to prevent reputational damages. And we'll create an environment where fishermen can continue operations feeling assured even if reputational damage occurs, the nuclear industry says. And under the measure, the nuclear industry will temporarily buy and store fish that can be frozen so they can poison you later. First off, the tanks are empty. If you go back and watch the presentation I done last week on the Fukushima dumping and tunnels and Fukushima tanks, there's several videos on the site. This is a new site because they took down my site with no explanation a few weeks back. Anyway, I'm not going to go through that. We've done a whole presentation on it. You can find it. Fukushima Festival in a nuclear wasteland. So they had journalists go down there to a festival take pictures and say how beautiful it is in the nuclear wasteland. Unreported event at Hanford nuclear site. The sickened workers smells like a cover-up. Unreported event. This is a horrifying. Hanford is 580-mile nuclear wasteland. Yeah, there's a hurricane headed to Newfoundland. Dana, yeah. I'm glad to hear that everything's still standing. Yeah, Newfoundland was covered in radioactive fallout, where I'm currently doing research. So we got the parts for the engine. So I should be able to get them tomorrow. I'll try to install them tomorrow. With Newfoundland, I'll show you where Newfoundland is to people that are trying to figure that out. It's right here, getting covered by radioactive fallout. And what we've seen and recorded over the last couple of years, even though I failed, and I admit that I failed, and not because of lack of trying, but because everything was against me. Which is, like, I was thinking about it today, how I had worked like a dog to get out and do species counts. And this year in particular, there's no spiders in the woods. Nothing. That's impossible, by the way. And so this is an extinction event. There was no birds, flocks of birds flying this year or last year, for instance. There's no birds in the ponds. Even though this year we found 2 birds in the ponds. It was amazing. You should have seen it. I had pictures. I'd done a show on it, but YouTube took down my site. We're going to have to do it all again. I'm actually ran into the ground. So currently what I'm doing is I got to make some hard decisions. And these are hard decisions that I got to make here coming up. I basically already made the decision. Let me talk about that for a second. Is that we need a studio, right? And because the landlord sold this place, I can't keep moving around. I'm too old for this shit. I'm too busted up. And because the expeditions they were successful, but we didn't get to complete the expeditions like we needed to. And because now they got rid of 24,000 subscribers, we can't fund anything anymore. And so I need a studio where I can't have it pulled out from underneath me, because in 3 weeks' time I got to be out of here and I don't got nowhere to go. And I'm looking for a place, but it's going to be really hard to replace this place. And so I come to the conclusion that because down here there is cheap land and old buildings that can be fixed up over a couple of months with my pension. I can do the gyprock myself, even though I'm busted up. But I can turn it into a real studio. I found a place last week, and he wanted $30,000. But I got a feeling I can get it a lot cheaper than that. But that's one of the few places that I found in the looking. And it's in a tough place, but it would work, right? It'd be a permanent studio. And minimum, I can keep doing this. I can keep coming out and pounding the industry with educational presentations. But we also set up a permanent studio, which is significant, by the way. And we got to start getting merchandise and selling merchandise. We got to get a couple of books out and start pushing this narrative out there so the world can wake up and slaughter the nuclear industry. And so I put a bid in on the studio for $10,000. They want $30,000 for it. But they're far away. They basically abandoned this place. I went down and checked it out, and it'll work. I got a lot of work to do for a couple of months, but it's not like it's 100% doable, and it could work. But there's not many other options. Is the problem, right? The other options is to burn my pension every month, with no way forward. And that's not going to work. We've tried this now, and it's just killing the whole operation. So like the way I'm looking at it is that nobody's going to support me soon. And we have no donations in the last 2 weeks, right? So I'm sure people are going to support me, but like I'm looking at it as if, what if nobody supports me? How do I keep the operation moving forward? How does that work, right? And I have to sell a bunch of stuff to come up with $10,000 if they accept that, right? I still, I get like 3 weeks to sell a bunch of equipment and get that $10,000 to get the land and a building that we can have a permanent studio in, which is what I should have done when I got here, obviously. And we're just running on empty the whole time, trying to keep the truth alive and trying to convince the world to fight back. And so now that I've been under siege for the whole summer, and he took down my main site with 24,000 subscribers, basically bankrupted the whole operation, I don't know how to quit. That's a major flaw that I got, which is a good flaw in this case, is I'm not going anywhere. I'm not giving up. I'm not slowing down. I'm not backing down. But this operation is in real trouble. If you can't fund the operation, it has to fall apart at some point, right? This is what we see happening right now. And so one of the options is to sell a bunch of equipment and get a piece of land with a building and convert it into a permanent studio where I can work for the rest of my life and come out and bludgeon this industry. And that's the plan that I got right now, is to come out and do exactly that, even though it'll be an extremely humble place. This is an extinction event, see these plumes? That's an extinction event for the whole planet. We gotta have someone like me out there that is honest and able to bring the documentation and is able to articulate the issues, right? We gotta have that. If the planet doesn't have that, then the industry, the vile, revolting, despicable industry will vomit all over us. And I just can't have that happen. So back to Hanford's story. Well, that's the plan that I got right now, is to sell most of the equipment that I can sell, raise enough money to buy, not rent, but to buy a permanent piece of land with an old shack on it. And I found one, surprisingly, but I don't have the money. I could probably get it if I had another 10,000 coming, I could probably get it. In fact, I'm sure I can, right? But you got to pay the taxes, you got to pay the transfer fees. It's in a no tax zone on top of that, so each year there's no taxes in this particular place. And they'd done most of the renovations about 7-8 years ago, but then they gave up and moved away. And so it's got, most of it's full of brand new wood on the inside. So all it needs is gyprock and flooring, and it's a beautiful building on the inside. It's hideous on the outside, but the roof is solid, and we can get it for less than 20,000. And so if I got to sell most of the equipment that I got, if I can actually get my hands on a spot like that, it's worth it. Because I can do this every day, what we're doing here. I can do this 7 days a week. And this is really effective. The industry hates my guts, because when they watch this, they want to hopefully cut their own throats. Unreported event at Hanford nuclear site to sicken workers smells like a cover-up. It was way worse than that. The contractor denied a chronic problem. Toxic vapors the contractor is Department of Energy, by the way. Workers reported smelling odors resulting in symptoms like dizziness and shortness of breath at a nuclear waste site. On June 18th of this year, 10 workers at Hanford site in eastern Washington digging is what is known as the tank farm. The tank farm is 150 tanks. They dug holes in the ground, put the big oil type tanks there, and they filled it up with nuclear waste. And of course, what happens is when you fill up a tank with nuclear waste, the heavy elements, plutonium, uranium, americium, curium, the heavy elements will sink to the bottom. When they come in contact with each other, they'll start a chain reaction. They'll burn a hole through the bottom of the tanks and go into a China syndrome, but also that releases the radioactive material into the tanks. And when you build tanks in the ground surrounded by a wet environment, it's going to rust regardless, right? It was supposed to be a temporary solution that is decades past its lifespan. Well, someone's got a studio I can use, but that's not the same. See, I'm in Newfoundland. Unless you're close by where I'm to, unfortunately, that can't work for me. I appreciate the thought, though. On June the 18th of this year, 10 workers at the Hanford nuclear site in eastern Washington digging what is known as a tank farm were overcome by a strange odor. If you're digging where they dumped all the nuclear waste and you're overcome by a strange odor, this is not up for debate. You're being poisoned by radioactive material. The industry denied it. 9 of the workers sought, which are usually contract daytime workers. They're just temporary workers because long-term workers don't go in that environment. 3 were transported to the hospital with an overnight stay and were given oxygen for being poisoned by nuclear. Yeah, I'm not Norwegian, unfortunately. I wish I was. Electricity poisoned humanity and destroyed the human life and all the 8 million species, yeah. Smelling unusual odors followed by adverse medical conditions are hallmark signs of chronic problems at a nuclear wasteland known as the nuclear reservation, which is 580 square miles. Exposure to toxic vapors that vent from underground nuclear waste holding tanks. And so instead they just denied that they were poisoned. Is under legal obligation, by the way, WRPS is under legal obligation to report vapor events on a publicly available website. It's still amazing that not one piece of paper has been put out about this exposure and that there's been no announcements to Tom Carpenter. Tom Carpenter has been there for well over a decade that I know of personally, and he's blown the whistle on endless events there. Contractor said they did not post the event on the website because they determined the workers' symptoms were not caused by vapors, but by malfunctioning gas-powered wheelbarrow. So they're saying it was carbon monoxide poisoning, not vapors from... not caused by vapors, but most likely by a malfunctioning gas-powered wheelbarrow. Well, first off, the gas-powered wheelbarrow shouldn't exist in that environment if you're down in a hole in the ground. But you're talking about a nuclear waste site, so you can't rule out that they were poisoned by nuclear. Toxic vapor exposures have been a significant problem since the 1980s, when operational mission went from producing plutonium to cleanup only. Since 1980, they'd only been doing cleanup there. 90, 2000, so for over 40 years, they've been trying to clean this up, and they expect they need $1 trillion more to do the basics, not actually clean it up. You would bankrupt America trying to clean it up. Several government reports have identified the poisonous vapors without warning will vent from underground tanks. Hanford has 177, not 150, underground holding tanks that store the deadliest waste at the site. Tanks in the tank farm near where the workers got ill in June contain contents including plutonium. And approximately 56 workers fell ill with symptoms in the rash of exposures after each incident. WRPS said that the testing didn't show chemicals of concern over regulatory limits. Yeah, they found lots of radiation, but it wasn't over the limits that they kept increasing in increments over decades. And that pattern wasn't new. Experts report details the same cycle happened at Hanford in the 80s and the 90s. a slew of exposures followed by denial by the tank farm contractors, and workers left sick and unable to work. In fact, this legislation was passed that if you worked here for 8 hours, a single day's work, 8 hour shift, no overtime, just 8 hour shift, you're entitled to a pension, which is being appealed by the scum degenerate nuclear industry because tens of thousands of people were thrown away like paper towels at these sites after being destroyed. Many workers said they felt betrayed by the contractors over the years for not being honest about the dangers of the vapors. It's not vapors, it's nuclear plumes. After the string of exposures in 2014, Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Hanford Challenge, and Local 598 all filed lawsuits against the contractors and Hanford's owners, the Department of Energy. The complaint accuses the contractor, the federal government, of failing to protect workers, and surrounding communities on freshwater, like the Columbia River, is one of the most radioactive rivers in the Northern Hemisphere. From vapor exposures can cause adverse health effects, including lung diseases, nervous systems damage, cancers of the lungs, the blood, and other organs. Well, there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, autoimmune deficiencies, and injuries will manifest long before cancer. As this event did not involve an ammonia alarm, it's not classified as an OP15, the spokesperson says. In other words, unless they get an ammonia alarm, it's not classified. They changed the rules so they don't have to put it on their website unless you detect ammonia. And ammonia is not going to be present in a nuclear leak. So in other words, so they don't have to publish on a public website any releases. The ultimate betrayal. Every facet of nuclear is the ultimate betrayal. Every facet of nuclear is meant to destroy humanity. Oh, this is the only good story we're probably going to get tonight because we're going to have to stop. And we'll cover this story tomorrow. Alok Sharma under fire as nuclear industry claims they have been banned from COP26 in the United Kingdom. Nuclear industry looks like it got banned. 15 applications for nuclear-related bodies are understood to be rejected by Mr. Sharma's COP26 unit in the Cabinet Office. Wait for it. Alok Sharma has come under fire preventing a series of nuclear bodies from displaying exhibits at COP26 Climate Change Summit. I still laugh every time I think about this one. Global nuclear industry leaders revealed every application so far put to a nuclear-related exhibits or events at the UN summit has been rejected. What they should do is they should have an exhibitor where they hang nuclear people who promote nuclear, right? They should have someone, this fella promoted nuclear, so we hung him. They should have like a mannequin hanging. Global nuclear industry leaders revealed that every application so far put to nuclear-related exhibit or event has been rejected. The move comes despite senior Tories insisting that nuclear energy, including investing in a new fleet of reactors, must form a significant part of Britain's plan to cut net greenhouse gas emissions to zero. Once again, you can't cut the emissions to zero with nuclear because nuclear is climate change. That is climate change. Pulsing energy every second. This is simple. The chairman of the new net zero scrutiny group of conservative backbenchers said, the fact these applications have been denied speak volumes about the muddled thinking of that underpins our domestic policy. No. It's COP26 is just sick of you scumbags. If COP26 is serious about reducing carbon dioxide emissions, a fundamental existing industry technology that could help achieve this has to be nuclear. No, nuclear is climate change, you scum degenerate. That's why they don't want you there. The criteria for applications put on exhibitions and events in the green zone include those showcasing innovation helping to tackle global climate change. But 15 applications from nuclear-related bodies, including trade and research associations, are understood to have been rejected. Yeah, because it's garbage. Nuclear is disgusting. Includes an application from the World Nuclear Association, which represents the global nuclear industry. They're a despicable lobbyist group. They're the worst. They're like the mob. They're mass murderers. They're a genocide group. The World Nuclear Association is the definition of evil. Only the most evil of evil gravitate to that group. To put on an exhibition featuring a life-size model of a nuclear reactor. They wanted to put a life-size model of a nuclear reactor. Unbelievable. Unbelievable at COP26 this year. And then Sama, right, the atomic playgirl for the nuclear lobbying, director of the World Nuclear Lobbyist Group. So we are deeply concerned that the news about every application on degenerate genocide nuclear energy for the green zone at the upcoming COP26 conference has been rejected. Yeah, because nuclear is not green or carbon-free or too cheap to meter. And we hope this is not indicative of how nuclear will be treated. Yeah, it is indicative. You're a scum. You should be arrested, put into a cannon for fodder, and shot into the side of a mountain. Would therefore urge you and the other organizers of COP26 to treat nuclear energy fairly, as if the nuclear stomps on all species. It exterminates all species. It's not low energy. It has to use 2 oil, gas, or carbon plants just to run, for God's sakes, in line with the recommendations made by numerous lobbyist groups. Dr. Sama, nuclear industry playgirl, the world is looking for thorough leadership from the United Kingdom this November. The World Nuclear Association, a 100% degenerate lobbyist group, has brutally represented the global nuclear industry in the UN Climate Change Conference since COP5. Nuclear power, they've taken over, see? Nuclear power plants currently produce about a fifth of Britain's electricity. But critics claim that they're not low carbon as they appear, partly due to greenhouse gas emissions involved in a lengthy construction process. No. They're emitting carbon every second of every day. It's called radiation. And it's pulsing energy every second. They're the epitome of stupid. Unbelievable, eh? Let's finish it out. The former Minister oversight of net zero legislation said, Boris Johnson is right to invest in Britain's future as a global science superpower, yet for energy, this means going nuclear or go home. Yeah, well, go home! And just jump off a building on the way there. Going nuclear or go home. That's the show. Ooh. My God. Nuclear trolls are getting, like, they're always the stupidest, I noticed, eh? Nuclear, like, look, I just provide the documentation. I don't make anything up. This is a radioactive plume. These are not harmless. These are not benign or innocuous, okay? These are lethal to all species. And this is what the expeditions have showed. I have 34 thumbs down. That's a new record. They'll be gone in an hour's time because what a despicable coward to give me 34 thumbs down, man. Wow. 35 thumbs down. 30. How the hell do I get 35 thumbs down? Look at this. What a coward thing to do. 35 thumbs down. I got 27 thumbs up. I got 27 thumbs up. Look at it. I got 28 people, 27 people on my show and 35 thumbs down. How's that work? I mean, my goodness, what a cowardly thing to do. And then spam me on top of that. What a cowardly industry. What a despicable coward industry to do that to me. I'm actually a good person, unlike them. Okay, well, let's call it a night, I suppose. 35 thumbs up, or thumbs down, for being honest. So just 28 people watching my show terrifies the nuclear industry so much, they spam my video 35 times. Now, it's all done from one IP address. If you check the video in a couple of hours, almost all of those thumbs down will be gone. They're just spamming me from the lobbying office, right? Good night, everybody. I only serve one king. Shane Clark. Hi, Shane. William, thank you. Jeffrey. James Lucis. Dana Nasana. Kilo Charlie. Ella. Wow, we got all kinds of people here tonight. Lori from I Serve Only One King. Hugs for everybody. Hope everybody has a great night. Metal World Peace. Barks and Meows. Good night, everybody. Nick Moulton. Labe. Anybody I missed? My apologies. Scott Walker from Scotland. The probably next geological disposal dump. Yeah, no, it is. I hear you. That's terrifying. I done the story earlier. Scott Brady. Yeah, we had lots of people in the comment section. Right, Colette S. Hi, Colette. Walt Disney. Christian Boyce. Just trying to do a shout out for everybody. Anybody I missed? I don't know how, but if I did, my apologies. Port Angeles 2. Hi, everybody. Warren. I see lots of people have found my site. It's fantastic to see everybody. Tom Morris. Steve Edwards. Good night, everybody. So hopefully the boat, I'll get the part tomorrow, install it on the boat. If the wind's not blowing, I'll just check the forecast very quick. I know we're going to get the hurricane is going to come through here next weekend, but tomorrow is Monday. We got to get a studio, is the way I see it. And we should have done it, but it's been a struggle. So it's 9 degrees out there tonight. Let's see the wind for tomorrow. The wind for tomorrow is northeast. We're over here by Labrador. Still can pull it off though. 11 from the northeast, 17 gusts. The next day it's 47 gusts. Day after that's 33 gusts, and 14, then 90. So if I can get the engine back together tomorrow, I'll get that part tomorrow morning, get the pieces in it. Then I'll launch the boat tomorrow and get it out and see if we can get rid of that issue, right? Because that's killing us. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Hi, Robert, Ted, and everybody else. God bless. Have a wonderful night. We'll see everybody tomorrow. We got a full show for tomorrow. Ready to go. We got to catch up on the news from the night and the last show. I got 750 stories there to cover, to catch up on, rather, that we got yet to cover. And the cycle never stops, right? So we'll pick what's important. We'll cover that. There is links below. We might... it might be 9 o'clock tomorrow night instead of 10 o'clock like tonight. Because right now it's almost midnight. It's 10 minutes to midnight, 7 minutes to midnight. So it's a hard way for me to end my day late at night. I don't get a chance to get a break, right? Not that I want a break. I'd rather go to war all day, every day. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow, regardless. Have a great night, folks.